While connected technology is essential for unlocking new efficiencies on the production floor, it's also presented hackers with new opportunities to steal valuable IP and data. To support OT professionals in their battle with cyber criminals, we launched the Security Breach podcast. In each of our over 100 episodes, we've brought in cybersecurity specialists to provide valuable insights and break down critical topics. As a go-to podcast for our listeners, we want to help you align your brand with our expertise. By sponsoring our podcast, your brand will build trust, and your message will stand out to an audience searching for tools to assist their cybersecurity efforts. Secure your share in this rapidly growing segment by sponsoring Security Breach. Contact us today to learn more. Hi, I'm Jeff Ranke, Editorial Director of Manufacturing.net and Manufacturing Business Technology. Welcome to Security Breach. Who are you? Well, I'm obviously not looking for a little response or quoting a timeless rock classic, nor is this the deeply philosophical edition of Security Breach where we delve into the innermost elements of your being to find deeper levels of soul-searching insight. Rather, we're looking to talk about one of the most challenging cybersecurity topics currently on the docket: identity management. My conversation with Brandon Transfelt, Senior Director and Global Technology Officer at CyberArk, took us into two equally important directions on this topic. The first deals with individuals and how to properly manage those accessing your systems and networks. The second, equally as important but potentially more complex, focused on machine or asset identities and understanding how to keep this sprawling attack landscape more secure. Perhaps most interestingly, Brandon offers some insight on cookies-based attacks and how, like so many cybersecurity challenges, the answers don't lie in the tech stack. Well, Brandon, thanks for joining us here and welcome to Security Breach. Good to catch up with you again.
So happy to be here, Jeff. Really appreciate the invite.
Absolutely. So we met out at RSA, and the big topic, a lot of people were talking about it. It's an area that you focus on with CyberArk. It's this identity management situation that we're coming across more and more, especially in the industrial sector. We've talked a lot about it out here in the program, but maybe we can start off with just some of the biggest issues or problems that a lack of or a poor identity management process really can create within an organization.
Yeah, happy to jump in there. So I think when we look at the identity landscape, one of the biggest challenges is the sheer volume of identities that are out there. Many organizations have either built out an identity program that maybe only focuses security controls on the most powerful identities, a privileged identity or privileged access management. But the challenge with that sort of volume element has been this level of creep from traditionally privileged identities, right? Your built-ins in various manufacturing systems, the ingress secrets that are used in order to gain access to ICS or OT environments, right? We had that core, but it then crept out towards what we call sensitive identities. So think of members of the IT staff that aren't necessarily the most privileged. Or if you look at the cloud as an example, site reliability engineers or developers or vendors as an example. So long rambly story short, the challenge has been finding ways to provide, I'll call it baseline identity security controls, strong authentication, credential management, access management, without having all of the heft that you would place into those traditional privileged access management programs.
Well, it's interesting. You talk about creep. That's a huge issue for manufacturers because we're always adding new assets, new technologies, new equipment onto the plant floor. That becomes an issue in terms from an access perspective. I know it's probably simpler to say than to do, but when we start looking at providing access to all these different things, how do you prioritize it? What are some things that you've seen companies do to, properly limit access to a lot of these new assets?
So step one, even before we start looking at controls, mapping, and risk, is to do it with empathy, right? We are not dealing with, I'll call it cold-blooded identities, even machines that likely have humans associated these days. So let's make sure that the controls we're putting into place are ones that we ourselves as security professionals would use. Better yet, Start your practice there. If you have access to any of these critical systems, it's a lot easier to go down to a technician on the factory floor and say, by the way, we would not do something here that we would not already consume ourselves. So starting with empathy, key indicator of success, you typically don't have to pay for empathy. It's something that comes in terms of the process and the program. Sure. And when we get into the tech stuff, phase one, typically we've seen the most successful organizations start with compliance-bound environments or very high visible risk. So naturally, if you are mandated to do it, chances are you should probably go in that direction. So that's kind of an easy one. That phase two comes into actually doing risk analysis. Let's look at the applications, systems, and environments we have and do either an internal review or work with, say, a systems integrator as an example in order to help you prioritize out. The phase three is going to be, I'll call it the flex area. We might look at application teams that are highly visible or working on a new project, or we might look at mergers and acquisition or expansion. Anytime that we're building a new process, a new environment, or implementing a new technology, it's an opportunity to start fresh versus saying, well, I got to now go back and deal with all the technical debt that built up over the years. So drawing a line in the sand has helped folks implement any controls, whether they're identity-centric, perimeter-centric, whatever it may be, in that third tier.
Absolutely. And, you talk about risk and you talk about setting priorities, and it's going to be unique for any organization based on their environment, their, what they have at their disposal, the new technologies they're bringing in. When you look at some of the criteria that you've seen companies use in determining those priorities, just putting it out there, sort of some random thoughts, I guess, or some different collectives, what are some of those priorities that you've seen different companies use in establishing sort of the pecking order of what to go after and make sure that they're getting the ID management in place?
So much of this response is the same regardless of the industry or environment we're looking in. But I'll start with some of the key differences that we've seen globally in manufacturing. Number one is how likely, if this identity or system is compromised, will it lead to potential harm to human life, to potential safety concerns? That's going to be your phase one. We don't see that in in finance naturally, but in manufacturing and healthcare, it becomes absolutely key. So let's, again, provide that empathy to the humans that make up our organization. So that's going to be your number one. Once we've done that, how much is this going to potentially harm the business if it's compromised from an operational perspective or an outage perspective, or of course, bottom line? We can quantify the level of potential risk by the level of dollars that it will cost the business, or whatever your local currency happens to be if you're not from the US. So health, quantifiable operational cost, which is where we start to see a lot of the machine identity areas of focus come into the mix. And then finally, I'll go back to visibility. What is visible to your board actively? If we eliminate all of the compliance and regulatory stuff, what we have left is helping design a measurement KPIs for your security program. It's the stuff that you take to the board and they'll say, oh my goodness, this is quantifiable reduction of risk. Here's extra funding so you can keep going down the path you're going, and don't tell them I said that.
Well, I mean, getting that higher level buy-in is a huge part of industrial cybersecurity, where we struggle right now. Getting the funding for it, getting the buy-in for it throughout the organization, because it starts at the top and bleeds through. Whenever we talk about risk, though, we like to think of it as something that everybody can agree on in terms of what risk is, what it represents for the company, and how we should address it. Not really the case in reality. I can see some of the things you're talking about here creating some real turf battles between OT and IT, even supply chain and some other players here. What have you experienced in trying to bring these folks together? It's hard. We know that. There's no silver bullet for this. But in trying to sort of get that one focus on risk and what it needs to be in establishing these priorities, what have you seen organizations do?
So outside of the turf wars and the Romeo and Juliet type back and forth between IT and OT, I'll give you one sort of piece of advice there that we've seen just growing significantly over the past couple of years, and that is typically the biggest arguments we get into are around human access, because we ourselves are human, right? A human can tell you, ouch, this hurts, I don't like this process. The counterpoint there is that many of you likely have some degree of compensating controls around your human identities, and it tends to see heads butting on both sides of the IT-OT equation. The area that exists as a frontier of opportunity for risk reduction is around the machine identity. Unlike humans, machines are unable to say ouch when a process doesn't work, or when they don't have the right level of privileges, or when authentication fails. What happens there is the lights go off, something doesn't work, we lose money as an example, or we now have to get humans in to figure out what was broken when we implement security controls. So long story short, where we've seen a point of, I'll call it agreeable, not necessarily disagreement, but we agree that there's a challenge, is when we look at machine identities. So if you are having that sort of infighting as it relates to human access, looking at the machine identity strategy can actually help teams come together, because chances are, if you don't have controls on the IT side, you probably don't have much better controls on the OT front. So machines are a point of agreement in a case where we're seeing that infighting between the two sides of the field.
Well, that's interesting, because that's the inverse of what you usually see. Usually it's a focus on the human identities, the human access, and then we get to the machine part and sending identities and different security protocols there. So working a little bit backwards, it does make sense, because we do find that common ground.
Yeah, and it's pretty far out. We every year CyberArk does an identity security landscape report where we look at trends, we map sort of trends that have been ongoing, in this case since 2007. One of the things and I'll back up, we tend to see security posture get better year over year. It's a testament to the work that this community is doing. But the one thing that we saw actually get worse was the number of organizations that have a definition for privileged access that includes machine identities.
Yeah.
Last year, it was something like 67% only had a definition for privileged identity that extended to humans. So machines wasn't part of the ecosystem. This year, that increased by more than 10%. So we're actually seeing more organizations like, I don't even know what to do with these machines out there. I'm just going to focus in on humans. Now, don't get me wrong, we have to go down both paths, but the number of identities that are expanding, primarily that expansion is being driven by the increase of automation, the adoption of more CI/CD tooling, I know we've made it a couple minutes in so far without talking about it, but the implementation of AI, whether it's traditional Gen AI models or agentic, all of these are machine identities. So if we don't start working on it today, chances are in a year, we're going to see another tick of exponential growth.
Well, and it's tough. You feel for the industrial sector here, because we're telling folks, hey, don't, eat the elephant, drink the ocean. Let's start with the basic stuff. They're starting with their people. And then we're getting into the machines. Unfortunately, in the meantime, all those machines are vulnerable because they don't have the right protocols set up for security, because we're not even identifying them and giving them unique identifiers. So it is a tough battle to wage, and sort of a tough thing to balance out.
Absolutely. There are some external factors that can sort of help with this balance. For a long time, the machine identity story, and by that what I mean is how we authenticate machines. So using attributes, what they are, not what they know, the concept of secrets management, all that stuff has kind of been around, right? It's been growing. Many organizations have integrated to where if you're using a vault, you hit a drop down and the machine now knows where to go get the secret and authenticate securely. But that was always driven by the internal desire to have better security or regulatory frameworks. There's been a big shift in the move from machine identity security from a very security-focused one to an operational one, particularly in the realm of certificate lifecycle management. As we saw with the CAB forum decreasing the lifespan of certificates down to 45 days and then lower, we're now getting, it's a worrisome push because we have to change processes, but it's a push that helps us move into this realm of machine identity security. So it's an external catalyst, right? I don't think any of us wanted it to show up, but it's one way that folks have been able to kind of recenter their machine identity strategy. Outages are just as painful, if not some cases more painful, as some of the aftermath of breaches. So
Yeah.
it's a different driver. It's a painful one, but it's a different one than we've seen in the past on the security side.
Well, it would kind of adjust the workflow too on the factory floor in terms of responsibilities and accountabilities for these certificates and how keeping them updated. So that's kind of an interesting dynamic too. That's something we haven't talked a lot about. What does that encompass? What is the workflow there in terms of keeping those things in working order, I guess you could say?
So two ways to do it. There's actually three ways to do it, but one of them involves you just paying someone else to handle it. Way number
Yeah.
one is we manually renew certificates that are out there. What that tends to mean is we've got a spreadsheet, right? We have a human who now needs ingress into the OT or factory environment. So we have this person that hopefully isn't chained to the desk, but a person who is responsible for going out performing updates. This assumes that you know where all of the expiring certificates have to live. So even before that, there is an inventorying process that many of you may do with something like CMDB as an example. So that's way number one to handle it. Way number two is automated. Leverage a certificate lifecycle management solution to find them, to renew them on your behalf, and of course to report to the humans that, hey, things are done, don't worry about it. The really cool part here is, of course, there are a lot of organizations that do it. I happen to be part of one of them, but there's also open source tooling that can help there too. So if you're not at a phase where there's a budget and stuff for that, the community has actually driven some pretty neat stuff that can kind of help you in the intermediary. But anything we can do to get out of the business of manual regeneration of certificates is going to help us meet the new mandates of the CAB Forum.
It's so interesting, Brandon, because all these conversations, the new challenges that pop up, it really always seems to go back to visibility and asset management and understanding what you have and just keeping track of that on a very somewhat basic level. I mean, it gets complex, but to start off with, it's pretty straightforward.
It is. You have to add in the variables of that volume we talked about, right? The creep and distribution. And in manufacturing, we also have a certain degree of proprietary, right? It's one thing if you're just made up of Windows, Linux, and Unix systems, but it's another thing if you've got a significant group of systems that run as appliances that can only be supported by A vendor or B vendor. Maybe one of them goes out of business. So to your point, it's the same basic concepts. Manufacturing happens to be one of the spaces where those variables tend to add to complexity significantly versus volume that we'll see in other industries.
Yeah. We've danced around, just switching gears a little bit, we've danced around this a little bit from the start, but you made a really interesting comment out at RSA when we were talking how a lot of this identity management is not really a tech issue. And you've talked about the human element a little bit, but maybe you could expand on that a little bit in discussing how that really comes into play.
Sure. I get myself in trouble, Jeff, because I like to talk about technology, right? I like bright light, shiny buttons, that kind of thing. But the people and process is where success is made. We talked a little bit about the concept of empathy. Part of it means taking a step out of your own shoes and thinking in the shoes of, say, someone on the factory floor. You might really love the concept of biometric authentication. You may have implemented, we'll use Touch ID as an example, fingerprint off. But if I'm wearing gloves, I now have to take my gloves off every time I authenticate. Or maybe you're doing iris-based authentication. Super cool. If I'm wearing safety glasses, I have to take those off. So now I'm going against protocol potentially in order to authenticate. So taking a step in their shoes really can start to help. This also means if we look at something like IT in manufacturing, looking at what I'll call unnatural workflows. One of the age-old challenges in any space, but particularly in regulated environments, is the notion of a privileged account, an alt account, Brandon_ADM as an example. It could be my route into OT. It could be how I handle IT systems. Now, if we don't do anything, you've given me this alt account that has my name on it, but you've made me change the password manually every 30 days. So I'm really grumpy about it. It's probably a permutation of my standard directory account with a couple extra exclamation points or other special characters, but you've now made me do all of this work for the sake of security. Now, a step above that is rotate that credential on behalf of the user, right? Leverage a password vault as an example. But even then, Now I have to go get it, right? Check it out, paste it somewhere, and then do it again when it's rotated. And I can tell you all of this to, we start to look at this notion of foundational access management, look for ways that we can natively connect a user to their target with whatever account without them having to leave whichever client they prefer. Native access has become a big, big part of even the most foundational powerful access management strategies. There's also a little bit of a psychological bend associated to it, because if you're using an account that has my name and you take it away from me, well, you've now taken a part of me too. So something like switching to functional or shared accounts can actually help get us over that psychological hump and lead to better adoption. But again, this is technology supporting stronger workflows for people that fit closer to the way they do work, that doesn't have to take a part of them away for the sake of good security.
Do you think a big part of that then is not scaring folks, but helping them understand the threats a little bit so that we can get greater buy-in, so they don't feel like, man, this is just another thing management is making me do, and it's making my life harder, and I can't write my password down on a Post-it note and stick it by the HMI anymore, and everything else.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Should I be excited or afraid of AI? The answer is yes, it's both.
Things are going to look so different in the next couple years. You will not be ready for the disruptions that are going to come.
I'm Jeff Nielsen, host of Digital Disruption, the go-to podcast for technology leaders.
Our generation's conflict, I think, is going to be emotional, not economic.
The companies that are going to win are the ones that have a couple of characteristics.
Stay ahead of the curve with Digital Disruption, available now on your favorite podcast platform.
Every user community is different, but by and large, your end users might not think about security in the way that you do. Jeff, to your point, right? It may seem like a mandate coming down from on high. Something as little as encouragement and reinforcement emails, as an example, or going from recognition of noticing phishing to saying, hey, by the way, here's a $5 Starbucks gift card for actually sending this to the SOC. Small things that can help our end users play a more active role in security. But if your users are sort of more developer centric or adjacent, as an example, just explaining the why, because security is probably not something they're opposed to, but they have 37 other things they have to worry about before good security practices. Sometimes the why is all it takes to actually help out. Better yet, if you could attach that why to time savings, so hey, we did this security thing, but we actually did the analysis, and turns out it's going to save you, we think, 5 minutes out of your day. That's quantifiable value, that security is doing something more than just securing.
No, those are excellent points. Love that, Brandon. We've talked a little bit about, too, some of the things CyberArk is up to, but maybe you can bring it home a little bit more and talk about how you're helping support the industrial sector.
Yeah. So we talk a little bit about machine identities, right? We see this one ballooning. So for us there, integration is key. I kind of hinted a little bit about that. But I say integration because really, when we begin to look at the proprietary devices, we begin to look at the visibility needs, partnership becomes the step above integration. For us and with any program, so we're not alone here, one-to-many security controls are always the most delicious and most effective. So one of the neatest things we've done recently is partnered with Microsoft and Device Authority in order to help level up visibility, particularly when we're looking at the management of secrets and credential material associated with proprietary OT systems, but also take time off of the need of having to now manually connect all of them to a rotation service, so on and so forth. So the big deal for us is integration at level 1, but partnership at level 2. Device Authority and Microsoft are two of the most recent ones, but this goes back to working with folks like Siemens, working with folks like GE to make sure that these things are built in. They're not built around where your teams have to go out and configure. So yeah, the partnerships for us are key, absolutely key.
No, I'm glad you bring that up, because we talk a lot about secure by design and things of that nature. It's understanding that dynamic that, yes, the integrators, the automation companies are going to bring in great stuff where there is some embedded security, but you still have a role in asking questions about that so that you can help make sure either it's the legacy equipment, the connection, the endpoint, whatever it is also in good shape. So it's a great point.
And challenge us on the way through. Like that's why we're here. If there, and I'm saying this in general of all vendors, but I'll personally commit to it on the CyberArk front. If there is an OEM that you're like, man, it'd be cool if somebody partnered with them, let us know. In a lot of cases, unless you tell us, we can only assume what might be the best path for your particular branch of the manufacturing community. So be loud with vendors. Not that you need my advice or permission to do it, but let us know where we're going. We're going in the right direction for sure.
No, great point. So in addition to identity management, I know CyberArk does some other things in looking at the threat landscape and some of the different things that are going out there causing problems. When you look at things right now, and I know we could go 100 different directions here, but what are some of the big things that the bad guys are up to that are really on your radar right now?
So we are seeing social engineering, as always, top the charts in the just sheer number of compromises we see. Now, identity is the foundation of that. Nearly 100% of the organizations we chatted with in our most recent report said they had an identity-centric event that occurred. Again, most of those, social engineering, phishing, that kind of thing. So making sure that we are educating is key, but also building in foundational controls there around strong authentication, around, and not just, by the way, strong authentication for the sake of it, right? Adaptive authentication is a big deal these days because it takes the onus off the user and reduces the authentication fatigue. But also looking at things like post-authentication compromise, cookie theft as an example, very, very common trend that we see even with our own red team engagements that we perform externally. So looking at social engineering and the human identity as being one that is, of course, key focus. This applies to any type of user that you deal with. The other one that I think is a nice bridge when we look at something like social engineering is the role that artificial intelligence happens to play. And again, I know a lot of AI discussions going on, but I'll break it down into 3 areas. The first trend that we're seeing is many organizations are leveraging security solutions that have AI embedded. So as we look towards the future, if I'm a threat actor and I know you've got a bunch of cool, nifty AI-powered security stuff, why not attack the model? If bad begins to look good, well, now the security that AI brought us can actually be a detriment. So looking into model security is something that we ourselves are seeing, but we're also seeing from other leaders in the industry. The second component of that is related to the introduction of AI agents, right? AI with agency that are outcome focused. I won't belabor on. The one thing I will note here is it's the ultimate blend until the next phase of human and machine identity too, right? A machine identity that needs access with I'll call it outcomes driven, not personality, but an outcomes driven agency that will not quit or does not need to be reprompted. So we're seeing a lot of interest there in working with ISVs that are building AI agents to help make sure that we can do things like birthright those identities, implement least privilege, and do things like secure auth. So I'll back it up a little bit by saying, yes, there's sophisticated AI, AI augmented A/B testing we're seeing to augment phishing, but model security and the impact of agents, that's something that we see coming around the corner.
Yeah, the agent dynamic, evolution, whatever you want to call it, is really something when you get deep into it, and it's basically AI agents asking other AI agents how to either more easily defend or attack different types of vulnerabilities. It's kind of makes your head hurt a little bit.
It does. It's agentic inception, I guess you'd call it, or maybe not. Now the inception sound effect is stuck in my head. But no, it's, from a vendor side of it, like we see the opportunity, but at the same time, if we're not building, which is why you hear it so much, if we're not building, every month that goes by is essentially being 12 months behind. So that's one of the reasons why you're seeing mass adoption. In addition to the performance improvements, the scaling improvements, all that comes with the architecture that you mentioned, Jeff. It's an exciting time to be in tech, and an exciting but also concerning time to be in security, I reckon.
Yeah, absolutely. Want to go back to one thing you mentioned about the cookies theft. that's going on and some of the things with that. Could you dive into that a little more deeply? That is something that it seems very basic or very common sense in terms of something that the hacker would go after, but maybe we don't think about it a lot because, again, in OT, we're thinking about machinery, automation, moving product. So could you dive into that a little bit more?
Definitely. Anytime we're interacting with a relatively modern web interface, cookies, of course, become a concern. But there are a few things that make it particularly interesting. The first is if I'm compromising an end user system or even a jump host that an end user happens to be using, phase one is to try and find admin rights to elevate my privileges. If I can't do that because you've taken it away, my next step is to begin to look at compromising the user land. One thing that is beautifully accessible in the user land is the authentication cookie. Many systems that were sort of built in that time before long TTLs for sometimes very good reasons might have overly permissive session lifetimes that make a cookie that's been stolen more valuable over time. Now, from a defense perspective, there are a couple of challenges that run into protecting something like session cookies. Challenge number one, if we try to abstract them completely, remove cookies, right? Users get really grumpy because they have to re-authenticate every time and go through the multi-factor that you've configured and all that good stuff. So we have to make sure that they're maintained. One of the things that we saw as a Newtonian apple falling on the head moment was, okay, what if they're still there? We just abstract them from the user space. Still generated cookies, but protect them from compromisation of the user land on the endpoint. So we're not the only shop out there that's doing something like this, but the cookie itself, once stolen, if we've got a permissive TTL, can allow an attacker to do things like bypass multi-factor, as an example. So it's an annoying problem out there because it takes the controls that we've built and it diminishes them without other compensating controls. So we see it a lot in productivity applications, of course, but think about it, right? If you're accessing any sort of cloud-hosted Exchange servers, as an example, Office 365, code repositories, that kind of thing, they're all leveraging this sort of session cookie model. So we're seeing it happen more often in our own engagements. It's why we started building out solutioning for it, as I imagine many of your other security vendors have too. But it's interesting because it doesn't require a significant amount of elevated privileges. It's done at the user land, and it's become even a part of it's become a part of everyone's days because even at home, sessions are generating cookies left and right. So it's one of those connections between home and IT, but also IT and OT.
Well, and it's interesting to me, too, because it really demonstrates the evolution of the hacker in terms of they're very innovative, but they're still taking the simplest approach possible. And this is a very basic element of connectivity with these cookies, and they can grab onto it and abuse it. It's very smart and very simple at the same time. So it's very interesting.
Occam's razor. Why do more when something works so well that requires 5 steps? I mean, yeah, you could have fun and implement more tech and go down the more advanced path, but if basic works, basic works.
100%. So, Brandon, this has been awesome. Really appreciate the time and going through a lot of different things here. Wrapping up a little bit, one of the questions I like to ask somebody who's really into this cybersecurity dynamic up to their elbow is, how do you sleep at night? I mean, we know all these bad things are going on. We know all of the challenges and troubles that we can have out there. We hear about things going on all over the world. What gives you some peace of mind when you put your head down at night that, hey, we're making progress, we're going to be okay?
Yeah. So glass of warm milk every night. No, just kidding. I will say generally, we see all of the ouchies in the news, right? In a 6-month news cycle, 3 or 4 as an example. What we don't see in the news are the organizations that have been successful. It's not super newsworthy. We don't give out security performance trophies, but if you look at 3 organizations in an ecosystem of thousands, security is batting pretty well. For me, it's cool to be a part of an organization that actually builds solutions for it. I imagine for all of you listening, if you're a part of a vendor, great. If not, you're ground zero in implementing the things that are causing this news cycle to not be as exciting as it could be. So long story short, what keeps me sort of comfy as I can be, is knowing that there's so much unspoken success out there that either I don't see directly, that all of you are impacting, that just makes things a little bit easier for me.
No, excellent point. And I would argue industrial cybersecurity has come so far in the last 3 to 4 years. The gains have been exponential and very impressive and something to be proud of. We just can't rest on our laurels at this point.
Well said. Always got to be active, that's for sure.
Thanks for the time, Brandon, and thank you for joining us today. To catch up on past episodes, you can go to manufacturing.net, IEN.com, or mbtmag.com. You can also check out Security Breach wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple, Amazon, and Overcast. And if you have a cybersecurity story or topic that you'd like to have us explore in Security Breach, you can reach me at jeff@IEN.com. For Brandon Trafstedt, I'm Jeff Ranke, and this is Security Breach.